Welcome, everyone, to People on Dating. I'm your host, Will Morales. And for those of you who are tuning in for the first time, this podcast is about dating and the ups and downs and how to navigate through it. Today, my guest is Branch Isole. He's an author, poet, storyteller. Branch writes and speaks about choice and consequence, accepting or avoiding personal responsibility, and the power of truth. Known worldwide for his contemporary short stories, reveal issues and emotions often experienced, but not always voiced. Branch, thank you so much for being on People on Dating. How are you, sir?
Hey, William, good morning. Thanks for having me. I've been looking forward to our time together.
Yeah, no, definitely. Me too. We got a great topic, 7 steps to rebuild a relationship. I know I've been through it. We all been through good and bad relationships. So, Branch, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did Branch get here? What was Branch's journey like? Um, uh, yeah, just tell us. Well, how did you get here to today?
Oh, thanks, Will. Yeah, I grew up in the 50s and 60s in a military family. So, we traveled quite a bit, lived in lots of different cities and different countries. After college, I went into the corporate world in sales and marketing. And although I was very successful in that endeavor, I discovered that, it wasn't very fulfilling for me. So I left the corporate world and became an entrepreneur. I was the founder and partner of 5 different startup small businesses. And about midlife, I had my crisis, but instead of buying a Ferrari, I decided to go back to school.
Right.
So I went back and got a master's in theology. At that time, I had, gotten off the world's path and got on more of a spiritually directed path. So in conjunction with that jump, I decided I needed to know more. So I went back to school, like I say, got a master's in theology. And the outgrowth of that experience came my first book. And now, 25 years later and 22 books later, here we are today.
Wow. Well, that's some journey. I mean, listen, in your biography, author, poet, and storyteller. I mean, that says it all about your journey right there. So again, today's topic, again, I love it. It's 7 steps to rebuild a relationship. And sometimes we go through it, a bad relationship, and then do we take ourselves to the next one, or do we stay home and heal? In your journey, Branch, your writings, your storytelling, and people you might have talked to, is it really possible to rebuild a relationship? Do we rebuild it during the relationship, or do we try to get back with that person and we'll go over the 7 steps because this will be fascinating for me personally. What's that journey like? Especially if the relationship you thought might have been bad, people calling themselves, calling each other names. Can that be rebuilt? Again, I know my question was all over the place. I went off on a tangent, so I don't know if you could dissect that, Branch.
Or, what's interesting is what you just described, all of those are possible.
Right.
No relationship is identical to the last one or the next one. Hopefully, we grow from each relationship. And the interesting thing about the 7 steps that we'll be getting into, I wanted to make a couple of caveat statements before we get to that point.
Sure.
Number one, this process or these 7 steps are not to take the place of professional help. When we're in a situation and we need someone from the outside to advise and consent and listen and help us, professionals are there. Clinical therapy, all kinds of different professional assistance is available. And what we're going to discuss today is not intended to take the place of that. What we're going to discuss today, Will, is sort of an intermediate step. In a lot of situations when our relationships go south for whatever reason, a lot of times, especially from a male perspective, what we want to do or attempt to do is say, I'm sorry, please forgive me, let's move on. And that's sort of the usual progress of, okay, let's make this better. The problem with that is the person who has been harmed, that harm goes deep. In fact, there's three levels of pain in every action that causes that harm. So let me go over those first.
Sure.
The first is the manifested pain from the action itself. So if I do something that harms or hurts my partner, then there's the emotional connection to that act, right? I've done something that's harmful, and that's the first level of pain that is experienced.
Right.
The
Can it
second
be?
level,
I'm sorry, Brent. I didn't mean to interrupt. Now, can that be verbal abuse, or maybe nonverbal ignoring? So it could be a little bit of different, but it's an action that caused the partner to feel that pain. Am I
exactly.
okay? Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. I do something, that causes that pain, and it could be verbal, it could be nonverbal, it could be physically abusive, it
Okay.
could be, stepping outside of the relationship. It can look like a lot of different things. The point is, it causes pain for our partner. And
Okay.
this can be, intimate partners, spouse, uh, relationship partner, a child parent partnership, something at work with a coworker. So
Mhm.
it's not exclusively, between a husband and a wife or a husband and a husband. It's the pain is manifested by the action, and the emotional fallout from that action is that first line of defense and that
Right.
first line of harm and hurt. The second level is the level of betrayal, right? I did the action and there was harm involved, but the person who I've harmed, not only are they upset about the action, they're also upset about the betrayal that's deeper than the action itself.
Right.
The third level is the level of trust. And this is the level that most often, if it is not addressed and at least attempted to correct, leads back to your original question. Without reestablishing a level of trust again, there's a probability that the relationship is irreparably damaged and can't be reconciled. So we've got the action, we've got the betrayal, and then we've got the breach of trust at the
Yeah.
bottom. And all three of those levels have to be addressed in order for us to begin that journey of reconciliation and repair. And this is what happens in most situations. The action takes place, the perpetrator or the transgressor says, I'm sorry, please forgive me, let's move on, let's go back.
Right.
And because we're not addressing all three levels, the person who is harmed, is deeply affected and carries that into and out of whatever the reconciliation process looks like. And that's the problem, that we address in our home or at the workplace when we're struggling with the issue.
Right.
And a lot of times people say, okay, well, let's go to counseling, right? Let's get professional help. But you may be in a situation where you can't afford to do that right away. So the 7 steps are this intermediary process that we can go through together in the privacy of our home or in our own space, and work through establishing sort of the groundwork and the ground rules of what we need to do in order to get on that reconciliation path.
All right, so let's get with the 7. I don't know if you want to go 7 to 1, 1 to 7, any order you want, because this is definitely interesting. Because in certain relationships, maybe whether, like you said, you got the 3 levels of pain, you got the action that caused the pain, you got the betrayal, and then try to rebuild that trust. I always think I agree. To me, trust is the biggest thing there, because if you can't trust your partner, then it's like, what's the point? So let's go with the 7 steps, Branch. We're talking with Branch Isole. So Branch, let leave the floor to you. And if there's anything, I'll interject with my 2 cents.
All right, buddy, sounds good. Well, there's a sequence to them. So we start at step 1, and that's recognition that harm has been done, right? I do something that hurts my partner or the other person in the relationship, and I have to recognize that they have been hurt. Again, a lot of people just don't want to go to that place and take that responsibility. And they say, oh, that's okay, get over it. We can work it out, kind of thing. Or they get really abusive and say something like, well, I've always been this way, right? So my question is, really? Is that the way you acted when you were dating? Are those the kinds of things you said and did when you were courting? So you haven't always been that way, but that first level is recognition that harm has been done.
Mm.
The second step is I have to take responsibility, as the transgressor, as the one who has caused the hurt or the harm. I've got to be responsible for my actions or my words. And again, we often want to blame somebody else or something else, or we want to, skirt the situation and make an excuse. And until we can take the responsibility, we can't go any further.
I
So
want
the
to.
third,
Yeah, I'm sorry, Brian. Because this is take responsibility. Now, is it up to the partner to tell that person this is what you did, and you got to take. I don't want to say take demand response that the person take responsibility, but if you're not aware of what you've done, you're just not. You're not just aware. Everything just breezes by you. Should it be the partner that should say something like, hey, you caused this pain to me, I really want to get through this, I really want to talk about it? Because some people might just get shelled up, if that makes sense, and then not even say anything, and then it festers on a little longer. Did that make any type of sense at all?
yeah, great point, Will, and you're so right. But the person who was harmed must say something.
Okay.
Now, in clarifying that, the interesting thing is, some people, don't want to go to that place. They say, well, I don't, I didn't say that because I didn't want to hurt their feelings. But the reality is, as human beings, we innately have within us an awareness of right and wrong. Okay. And because we have that innate ability to recognize right and wrong, we also have the ability to see red flags or see when we are not being treated with respect. And everyone is capable of giving and receiving love. And because we are capable of loving, we are also capable of immediately identifying unloving behavior. And if we choose to make an excuse or put the blame somewhere else, it doesn't diminish the fact that the behavior is unloving. We can all recognize loving behavior and unloving behavior in our relationships. So it's essential, if we're going to go forward, that we both agree that harm was done, and this is, the action. This is what caused the harm. If you want the relationship to begin that healing process, that has to be put on the table. Right. And in our nature, especially in the world we live in today, a lot of people don't want to take responsibility for what they've said or done. They'll make an excuse, they'll place the blame someplace else. They just can't or don't want to go to that place for whatever reasons, they're bringing with them from their childhood and into adulthood. Right. And if you can't go there or won't go there, the chances are, the relationship is going to be terminal. You either have to fix it and correct it, or it's not going to work. And in order to begin that fixing and correcting, we have to know and agree what the harm was, what the action was. So yeah, if I'm the one who was harmed and my partner who was the transgressor won't bring it to the table, then if I want the relationship to survive, then I've got to bring it to the table. And in loving relationships or even in close business relationships, the longer we're there, the more we get to know our partner. And the deeper our relationship becomes, the whole idea is this is the person that I can be vulnerable and open with. That's the key. I've got to be able to say what you did, hurt me in this way, and I would like to repair it. The person
Yeah.
who did the harm has to say, I understand what you're saying. Even if in my own mind I don't agree that I hurt them, they were hurt or harmed. And for that fact, then I have to accept that whatever I said, whatever I did was harmful. So that's sort of the beginning point as we jump off into the rest of the steps, which are the action steps of, okay, harm was caused. I did it. I take responsibility. Now, where do we go?
Okay. So now we got step number 3.
Step number 3 is regret, right?
Ah,
I have to regret that I caused the harm. This one is easy, but it's also difficult because, this gets back to that taking responsibility for what I said or did. And in reality, the difference between childhood or young adulthood and adulthood is that capability to take responsibility. You see this a lot in teenagers, especially in school situations. Something happens, off to the principal's office, and I didn't do it, he did it. All this get out of it, refusal to take responsibility. Well, that's immaturity, in action. As we become adults and interact in an adult world and adult relationships, that taking responsibility is really the growth part of making that transition from juvenile to adult. And so those people who can take responsibility, the nice thing about taking responsibility is if you pull a band-aid right off, you get in there, you get over it, you say, I messed up, this is how I'm going to correct it, I'm sorry that I did it, and let's figure out the solution. And if you can do that, all of these things that we're going through speed up this process. At each step, if we falter, all it does is drag us down. We've got to eventually get to each of the next levels, the next steps, or it's not going to work. So the sooner we can recognize harm was done, take responsibility, feel that regret, which allows me to go, okay, I need to make it better. That leads to our next step, which is remorse, right? Now, it's interesting because people say, well, isn't regret and remorse the same thing? Well, in a way it is, but remorse is a little different. When I have regret, the regret is that I harmed you. When I get to the step of remorse, the remorse is not only did I cause harm, but I actually feel bad for myself about my own actions. I understand that I shouldn't have done it, even as we were talking before, and the other person says, well, you really hurt me by what you said or did. When I get to that level of remorse, I understand that not only did I hurt them, but I actually caused harm to myself. And so that's the difference between the regret and the remorse stages, but both of them are essential if we're going to come up with a solution.
yeah, I like that because remorse, like I said, you feel bad and all that, and regret, you're like, hey, I caused the harm, but I'm gonna move on, but I remorse, yeah, that's when you know that you actually like, oh shoot, I gotta fix this, man. If you have any type of feeling as a person, you want to fix it. So we got uh so number 1 was harm you have done, if I got that right. Take responsibility was number 2. Number 3 is regret that I caused the harm, and number 4 is remorse. So let's go with number 5.
Number 5 is the redress or the solution. What are we going to do to fix it? How are we going to start the actual reconciliation or repair cycle. And so that's the redress. We come up with a solution. Is that go to get counseling or help? Possibly. Is it to check in, depending on what it was? Is it, if it was verbal abuse or nonverbal abuse, as soon as it happens, does the other person say, hey, we're back in that place again? So we've got to agree, whatever is causing the issue or the problem, our solution is going to be recognizable, and we're going to, stop where we're going and start where we have decided to go for the future.
Wow, that's
The
deep.
next step,
And which is number 7. Yeah. I'm sorry, number 6. Sorry.
Yeah. Number 6 is repeat. We have to agree that this action cannot be repeated in the future. And that's what it comes down to. And again, this is when it starts to crop up, and it's always going to come back. There's no way you're going to go from 100 to 0. You start back on the process, but it's going to rear its head again. That's human behavior, right?
Yeah.
We've got to go through this growth process in order to wean off of the bad behavior and replace it with better behavior or good behavior. So we know it's going to happen again, but it cannot be intentionally repeated.
Mm-hmm.
If I did something outside of my relationship with my spouse or my partner that's caused this pain, I've got to agree that it can't happen in the future.
Right. So that person has to be
step 7.
And that person has to be self-aware too, right? Branch, that, hey, I did cause the harm. There was, I took responsibility, which is number 2, regret that I caused the harm, remorse. Now I got to fix it. That's the solution, which is more communication, right, Branch? I think that's always the biggest thing, is communicating with each other.
Yeah, exactly. The 3 biggest problems studies show in adult relationships, marriage relationships, revolve around sex, children, and money.
Mm.
And so when you understand and recognize, what our problem is, what our issue is, and we're going to correct it or change it, then we've got to be able to identify what leads into us going to that place. And that's what we can't do. We've got to not repeat that. We've got to immediately, or again, as soon as possible, go to the new place. We've got to get out, drop the old baggage, and try what we've agreed to would be the new step. And so that brings us to step 7, which is the most powerful and the most essential, which is repentance.
Mm.
Well, the interesting thing about repentance is most people consider that to be, a religious thing.
Right.
I've got to repent. I've got to do this thing with the Lord or whoever their God is, right?
Yeah.
The reality is repentance is only changed future behavior. So not only can I not go to that place again in the future that caused the harm, I have to ensure that when I am tempted or tested or challenged to be in that place again, my actions and my future behavior must be different. And this is the key. You've got to change your future behavior by not going back to that place. So if you can get through all these 7 steps, there's 2 caveats again.
Sure.
Both people or whoever's involved in the issue have to agree to attempt to go through all 7 steps. So often we find people who get started and then for whatever reason, they sort of fall back into the old patterns and the process goes out the window. And what they see is a repetition of that inappropriate behavior. And they never get out of that cycle. Yeah. And eventually, the relationship is unbearably broken. Misery and uncomfortableness becomes part. And then it's a matter of, well, how much are we going to go through before one of us can't stand it any longer and takes action? So the 7 steps are important. And again, this is a great intermediary process for couples or relationships that are having problems and want to correct them, to reconcile, to repair them, but for whatever reason may not be ready for professional help. The great thing about going through the process is if you do go to get professional help, you will have already started laying the groundwork for all of the kinds of initial questions that the professional is going to ask. So you've already started the process, and now you can, build upon that with somebody who's clinically or therapeutically trained, but you've started the process. So even if you don't complete the process, if you start it and then take what you've done to the professional, it'll go faster, it'll go quicker, you'll get to the issue and you'll get the help sooner.
Right. No, I love this. You know, my God, you probably could have gotten probably another 10 more, steps, but I think this is perfect. Again, and to repeat it, harm has been done. Take responsibility. Number two. Number three is regret that I caused the harm. Number four is remorse. Hey, I really screwed up, man. I feel shitty. So, if she does, how do I feel? I like that. Number five is the solution. It all comes down, like you said before, communication. Let's talk this out. Number six is repeat. In parentheses, don't repeat, if you want me to write it that way. And number seven is repent. These are definitely followable steps. I love this. And any last words with these seven steps? If you want to add what you to what you just said, maybe not another caveat, but if you want to add something like, hey, this can be done. I really believe this could be done if both people at least talk to each other. Sorry, I went
Yes.
off on a tangent.
No, we've got to communicate.
Right.
If this is the person who means most to you in life, then you've got to be willing to at least at this point, be open and honest, right? You're never going to get ahead in this struggle if you can't be vulnerable, you can't be open, and you can't be honest. You said something earlier that's so important. We get into a situation and we start digging that hole, and we think, well, the way to get out of it is to continue to dig. Yeah. Well, we understand that that's not the way. The thing that I'd like to leave the listeners with who are considering this process, if it might be workable for them in their situation, is this. A lot of times, especially as I said before, a person says, well, I've always been this way, so what do you expect, right? Yeah. Well, we know that that's not true. We know that that's a false statement. So whenever you're about to say something to somebody, especially if you're in this reconciliation process, before you talk, stop. Say to yourself, don't demean, or you can say, respond respectfully. And instead of, going to that automatic place where you spit out or spew out that emotion that is harmful, but it's where you kind of often go when you're on the defensive, stop and just say to yourself, respond respectfully. Yeah. And then respond that way. Even if it's, hard for you to do, the first thing you need to say is something respectful. That's the only way that you're going to reconnect and recommunicate to make the process work.
No, I love it. First of all, Brent, I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be on People on Dating. And before I let you go, I know you have tons of books. Talk about some of your books and your ebooks, because I think you probably got another 10 books in you before you retire, which you should probably retire at 90. So you got another good 30 years in you.
I hope so. Yeah, thanks. I've got a website. I've got a YouTube channel. There's lots of stuff on there for free to read. I've got a link on my website that says podcast. And if you missed anything today, there's a free PDF download there. you can go to and refresh what we've talked about. There's also some other information for you. Everything there is free. The books and the ebooks are available. They're available on the website, and Barnes and Noble, Apple, all the usual places that you would get books or ebooks, Amazon. So if you find things that think you might be interested in, take a look. Let me know if you have questions or comments. We always answer people who write to us. And if you want to find me, the easiest way just to Google my name. All of the podcasts and the books and the ebooks and everything I've written will come up for you, and you can just follow the links.
Yeah, I'll definitely put on the show notes as well because of all the books and ebooks you have. So I'll definitely put a link that people could go straight there. Well, anyway, Brent, I appreciate everything that you talked about. And again, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. I really, really appreciate it. I had a great time talking to you, buddy.
Hey, Will, can I make one more comment?
Yeah, of course. Please, please.
For your listeners, if you've enjoyed what you've heard today from Will and I, do me a favor, go to the platform you're hearing this on, give Will a review and a rating so you can keep bringing guests on that have information for you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yes, I need all the subscribers on YouTube. Yes, I'm not going to lie, and yes, it's a selfish pitch, but yes, thank you, Brent. I really appreciate that.
Hey, Will, thank you. Have a great day.
You too, buddy. Thank you. Bye-bye.